you don't have a little sponge on your mic.
Is mine on?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. Good evening and welcome to the April 23rd, 2024 regular meeting of the City of Troy Planning Commission. Copies of the agenda for tonight's meeting are available at the entrance to the room. Agendas and minutes of prior meetings are available on the city website. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or amended by the Planning Commission.
State law establishes planning commissions. This planning commission is comprised of 9 residents appointed to serve our community. Members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the city council. Other individuals participating in the meeting include representatives of the city's planning department, city attorney's office, and the city's planning consultant, Carlisle Wortman Associates.
If you wish to address the Planning Commission, please come forward to the lectern when recognized and clearly print your name and address on the sign-in sheet. Please begin your remarks by stating your name for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the Planning Commission, not to anyone else in the room. If you have a cell phone or any other device that might disrupt this meeting, please either switch it to silent mode or turn it off. At this time, I ask the Planning Commission Recording Secretary, Kathy Zarnicki, to conduct the roll call.
Mr. Buechner?
Here.
Mr. Faison?
Here.
Mr. Fox?
Here.
Mr. Hudson?
Here.
Mr. Krent?
Here.
Mr. Lambert?
Here.
Ms. Malala-Holly?
Here,
Ms. Parakis?
Here.
Mr. Tagle?
Here.
Quorum present, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next is the approval of the agenda for tonight. Mr. Faison?
move.
And Mr. Fox will second that. Roll call, please.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Malala-Holly?
yes,
Ms. Parakis?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Buechner?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the April 9th, 2024 meeting. Does anyone want to make a motion? Mr. Buechner? And Mr. Lambert will second that. Any discussion, questions, comments? All right, I think we're ready for the roll call.
Mr. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Malala-Holly?
yes,
Ms. Parakis?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Buechner?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, and next up is public comment for items that are not on tonight's agenda. If anyone's here to say something for items not on the agenda, please come forward. Seeing nobody, we're going to move on to the preliminary site plan approval, JPLN 2023-0031, proposed Waddles Square Apartments, south side of Waddles and east of John R., PIN 88-20-24-100-39, Section 24, zoned Neighborhood Node F, zoning district. I will now turn it over to Mr. Savadant for a presentation.
Thank you. My regular sidekick was unable to attend the meeting this evening, so I'm back in the saddle making a presentation, so it's always enjoyable to do that. So I'm going to start summarizing the project. We have a proposal for a multifamily building on the south side of Waddles, just east of John R., and the subject property is 3.47 acres in area. The site is currently vacant, but there are a large number of trees on the site. As you indicated, Madam Chair, the site zone neighborhood node, specifically Node F, multifamily is permitted by right in this district, provided, because it's abutting single-family residential, provided that there's a maximum height of only 30 feet and 2.5 stories, and there's also transparency requirements that are going to apply to this application. We'll get into that in a second. The site is master plan neighborhood node under our current master plan, because the draft master plan has not been approved yet. There's numerous intended purposes of neighborhood nodes, including helping to develop a social neighborhood to create a more livable community, mixed use, provide neighborhood gathering places, and accommodating the daily needs of residents. And I'm not going to get into all of this because it's in the report, but there are specific site design attributes and building design attributes that are associated with the neighborhood node. And this specific node, again located at John R. and Waddles, this is from the master plan. This node may include all uses from high-density residential in combination with restaurants, limited office and retail, development at this intersection should include at least 2 of these uses in any one development in order to better complement and strengthen the already mixed-use character of the node. And I want to just give this a minute or two of providing context, and that not only in terms of site context, but also timing. The neighborhood node obviously is a topic that we've focused on the last couple of years because it was a focus of the master plan update efforts. And we've actually walked this neighborhood node. And it's across the street from the Enclave, which is generally considered a pretty a positive development for the city of Troy. And this parcel, as I indicated earlier, also abuts single-family residential. So there's a lot of scrutiny to this development, and it's also the first true garden-style type building that I ever remember reviewing. So it's a new concept to the potential building stock in the city. So for these reasons, we really wanted to make sure that we fully vetted this application and fully discussed it with the Planning Commission, and our report went into a great amount of detail. And what also complicates this application, and this is a problem that the staff created, is there's been so much back and forth on this. I think there was 4 or 5 revisions that were submitted, and there's a lot of back and forth with emails and confirmation and files getting sent and whatnot. When that happens, there can be mistakes made, and we did make a mistake in this report. And I'll get into the details, but I just want to go on record for and apologize to the Planning Commission for the there's a couple of errors that I'll talk to, and I also want to apologize to the applicant because when there's errors that when a Planning Commission member reads the report and it lists a bunch of non-conformities or areas where it doesn't comply, it sets the path, kind of the wheels in motion down a path that potentially ends in failure, and it's more compliant than the report indicates. And I'll get into those, but I just wanted to kind of lay that out. So the proposal is 54 units in 2 buildings. They're outlined in red. Again, as I indicated, they're garden-style apartments. And this is a definition. It really doesn't matter what the source of the definition is. Mr. Fox sent an article last week that spoke to this a little bit, but the definition I think that works here is for garden-style apartments is that units generally located on the ground level in an urban area, partially below the street, between the basement and the ground floor of a multi-family building. That does about as good of a job as any in explaining what's proposed. If you look at the top illustration, and it's in the packet as well as in the report, you see doors. When one opens the door, they step into a landing, and they have to make a choice to either go up or down. It's not at grade living area. Visitors or residents must make a choice to go up or down. And there's living space down and there's living space up. And if you look at there's 3 levels in the building, and the first 2 levels comprise 1 unit, and then the top level is a separate unit. And that's what they propose in terms of these stacked flats. And I'm going to get into the specific details of the garden style units in future slides, but right now I'm just talking about the site itself. So their access is from Wattles and as well as John R. There's direct access into the site to the east. There's another access point on the Rite Aid property to the west of that point, and there's also access on John R. Road that's used by Rite Aid. The owner owns both parcels, and prior to final approval, they're going to combine both parcels. So that's important. So they can share parking, and there'll be shared parking easements on both sites. They park independently, but they're going to. They do propose a community building and some shared parking on the Rite Aid site. In the southeast corner of the building, there's a proposed outdoor space that goes into a proposed community building. The details of what's proposed for that are in the packet, and the applicant will have an opportunity to come up and talk about that, as well as their architect. Buffering and relationship with single family is very important. The Planning Commission a few years ago, besides amending the ordinance to limit height in neighborhood nodes when abutting single family, they also amended the ordinance to increase setbacks. And what the requirements say is that setback shall be a minimum of 20 feet, or at least the height of the building, whichever is greater. Well, the height of this building is 30 feet, and the proposed setback to the south is 72 feet, and to the east is 90 feet. So it greatly exceeds the minimum requirements for setback. There's also the proposed, you see to this, there we go. To the south, there's a double row of trees proposed for both the southern and the eastern property lines. If you drive by the site now, there's a lot of trees on the site. Most of the trees are invasive species. They do provide value as trees, provide shade and habitat and a bunch of other great things. They're not ideal trees from the standpoint of preservation, but they do propose to replace more inches that are being removed in terms of quality trees. So the tree replacement is compliant, and the number of parking lot island trees, they proposed 14. The report indicated that they were not compliant in terms of parking lot island trees. They are compliant. Landscaping is fully compliant. I do want to note one thing along the top, and this is not an error per se, but you see the landscaping that's proposed north of the sidewalk. There were no comments internal on this, and I didn't catch it until I started to prepare for the meeting. But the ultimate right-of-way at this location is 120 feet, and right now it's only 100 feet. So those trees that are shown in yellow, although it would be nice to have those trees, those are in the future right-of-way that will be required for any future road widening project, as well as potential deceleration lane in front of this building. So I don't want anyone leaving here thinking there's going to be a significant row of trees in the city right-of-way. There will not be. So forget about those trees. They're not going to be there. Parking. As I indicated, our report incorrectly stated that there were more units than 54. And we indicated that they did not comply with parking. The requirement for those units is 2 spaces per unit. So 108 spaces, they're providing 109, and the retail is also compliant. So this site is compliant in terms of parking. I want to be very clear on that. So overall, specifically talking only about site layout and site design, not getting into the building yet, they're compliant, except they need to add a bike rack. There's plenty of places on that site they can squeeze in a bike rack. So I don't want to speak for Mr. Otto, but I think he would come up to the podium right now and say he's happy to put in a bike rack. But that's the only site non-compliant issue that we've identified. So now we're going to talk about the building. So the verbiage that the Planning Commission approved a few years ago related to the neighborhood nodes is in the top point in yellow. Any building or portion of a building on a parcel abutting a one-family residentially zoned parcel shall not exceed 2.5 stories, 30 feet in height. And I don't want to get into the weeds here, but we have a definition for story and a definition of basement. A basement is not a story. There's a differentiation between a basement in the zoning ordinance. And our definition of story basically says that a story shall not be counted as a story when more than 50% by cubic content is below the height level of the adjoining ground. It's a real mouthful. But what this basically means is the drawing on the left is from our zoning ordinance. The situation we have is the situation on the left, where that lower level is not a story, it is a basement. And they provided evidence in the drawing to the right that it is a basement and not a story. So this application as a 2-story building, per the zoning ordinance, as a building it complies with the maximum height requirements insofar as it does not exceed 30 feet and 2.5 stories. The outstanding item that the Planning Commission needs to discuss is transparency. And transparency is basically the relationship between the building and the street. This is a form-based district, and when this was created, one of the goals of this district was to bring the buildings closer to the street so that they relate to the street. And for the facade that faces the street, there's a requirement that 50% of that facade be transparent, be comprised of glass that you can see in and out of. And that's measured between 2 and 8 feet above grade, which is roughly represented by that swath in red. Now, one of the reasons we wanted the Planning Commission to look at this is something I indicated earlier. We just don't see this style of design for buildings. Now, we recognize for residential buildings that they're a little bit different than commercial because people who live in residential don't necessarily want people walking by or driving by looking in their windows. So they've got drapes and curtains that they can pull. But we still wanted the Planning Commission to talk about this design as it relates to the street, because when one walks in, as I indicated, there's a platform and you have to go up or down versus a commercial building where you walk in the door, and if it's a hairstylist, you can look in the window and you can see the activity. So it's a little bit different approach, which is why we really kind of got into the details in the report. So this is the transparency that we require, which is 50% when facing the street. So to engage the street, the apartments, the garden-style apartments that they propose, what's a little bit different is the landing is at grade. We've got balconies at eye level, and we've also, I should have added another bullet point, we've got subterranean living space. So when you walk down the sidewalk and you see window, you look down, you see windows, you look up, you see balconies and windows, and you see a door. So it's a totally different way of looking at it. But the challenge we have is we have a requirement that it's 50% transparency, and they're providing only 41% transparency. So it's non-compliant by 252 square feet. We also, on the elevations that abut parking, there's a requirement of 30% transparency, and the applicant needs to confirm whether that is met. I'm pretty confident on the south side, because it basically mimics the north side, that it exceeds 30%. I am curious about the east side. So what the applicant proposes, and their architect can speak to this after I talk, the ordinance allows the use of transparency alternatives to count towards the remaining lack of transparency, that 252 square feet. And they propose various solutions, including wall change in plane provided by balconies, awnings, and open walkthrough, horizontal and vertical scaling elements provided by material changes, material color and pattern changes, variations in material module, pattern, and color, and integrated architectural ornamentation provided by balconies, awnings, and open walkthrough. And they're seeking relief from the Planning Commission by using these transparency alternatives in lieu of adding more glass. They do provide a building material plan. They provide a wide range of different materials, brick veneer, concrete block, metal siding, etc. It's in your packet. So questions for the Planning Commission to consider. I think this is my second last slide. So we're almost there. Does the Planning Commission support the proposed transparency alternatives that I just mentioned? Does the proposed garden-level, garden-style apartment style meet the neighborhood node design requirements? And does the Planning Commission support the proposed floor plans, including community building, elevations, and balcony clearance? And in terms of other specific measurable things to address, the applicant is to provide one bike rack, and also to confirm transparency requirements of minimum of 30% on the south and east side of the buildings. Of course, the Planning Commission may approve transparency alternatives similar to the north side for these two sides as well. And with that, long-winded presentation. I can answer any questions and remind the chair that the applicant wishes to make a presentation after this one.
Sure, of course. Does anyone, Mr. Fox, have a question for Mr.
So
Savinoff?
just to confirm, the transparency requirements, are they only applicable to the portion of the build that is facing Waddles Road, or is every direction, like the portion that's facing west, east, et cetera?
There's a 50% transparency for that elevation abutting adjacent to the road. 50%.
Facing Waddles Road.
Facing
Okay,
Waddles
okay,
Road.
Cool.
On the south side and on the east side, there's parking spaces that abut next to the building.
Okay.
And the transparency requirements on those sides is 30%. On the west side, because there's some open space area and the parking is fairly far removed from that, there's no transparency requirements that apply to that side.
Thank you.
Mr. Faison?
You had a slide where you talked about what was permitted in that specific node. Could you put that up again? Yeah. It says, development in this intersection should include at least 2 of these uses in any one development. So does this comply with that?
Well, I indicated, and the site plan indicates they do propose to combine the parcels, so there's a Rite Aid in the parcel to the west, there's a hair salon, and there's a proposed communities building that would be affiliated with this apartment building. So in terms of horizontal mixed use, once combined, this would be technically horizontal mixed use.
Okay. And then any future development of those buildings would be limited by this language?
Well, it is a policy document, but this language represents the land use and development goals of this node.
Thank you.
Keeping in mind, if I could add one thing.
Of course.
So we're hoping, we're looking right now at the master plan going back to the city council in May. May 20th, I believe, is the date that we just came up with today for public hearing. So hopefully it's approved by city council, as recommended by planning commission. And once we approve that policy document, the next set of the next thing to add to the planning commission to-do list will be looking at the neighborhood node language in each of the nodes, including this one.
Okay, thanks.
Ms. Malala-Holly?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Since the applicant is planning to use part of the Rite Aid currently located site to also provide provision for the proposed development, why was that not part of our site plan review? Because right now, on page 18 of our packet, we only have a red rectangle sitting right on top of the vacant lot. But that's not the only lot that we are considering today. We are also considering a portion of the Rite Aid building to be also used for today's application.
Yeah, I will admit it's somewhat confusing. I thought it was called out in enough detail in the report, and if we mentioned it in the PowerPoint, it would be very clear. It's confusing by not adding the red line around the abutting property in the drawing. It's also confusing by adding it because there's an existing building there, so I didn't know what was the best path there. I suppose I could have done 2, like one. They could have each been standalone polygons, but I apologize for the confusion. That was my decision. I thought it was clear in the report. Apparently, it wasn't.
Thank you.
Mr. Lambert?
Yeah, but in the report, and you kind of touched on it, but more involved in the report was talking about the safety issues with those balconies. Is that a significant concern from the point of view of city staff? It's more of a concern. So we have a pre-meeting
as you know, Mr. Lambert, as a previous chair, we have a pre-meeting discussion with the chair before every planning commission meeting. And it's referenced in the report, and until I had a conversation with the chair and the vice chair, it's in the report. I didn't think personally at reviewing it that it was a significant issue, but I mean, animals could fall in it, children could fall in it. It's a little bit of a challenging design because there's no. I spoke to with our building official. There's no specific building code requirement that it be fenced or protected in any way. In fact, it's required emergency egress. So they're going to have emergency egress windows there, and any type of fencing that we use, we can't lock it because that would impede the ability to leave the building in the event of emergency. So we started to spitball about potential design solutions in the meeting. We were almost late here. I don't know if I've answered your question, but it's something that we can certainly talk about with the applicant this evening.
And the second question related to in the report also from Carlisle Waterman, they talked about, and maybe this is the transparency issue, they talked about the side of the apartment building that faces Waddles looking more like the back side of a building rather than the front side. Is that the transparency issue there?
Yeah, I think we could have worded that verbiage a little bit more sensitively, maybe. But I think the point is what I was trying to get at in my presentation is it's just something we're not used to seeing. It doesn't relate to the street the way we're used to seeing it because it's not the first floor isn't that great and the windows aren't where we expected them to be. There's a balcony in the design and it's et cetera. So I think there are certainly visual clues that this is the front of a building, but there are other things that maybe aren't intuitive to people who are used to seeing buildings in Troy.
Right, thank you.
Does anyone have any questions at this time for Mr. Sabadat? Ms. Malala-Holly?
One more clarification, Brent. Page 14, the rendering that we have with flat roof and with a sloping roof. Just a clarification on that?
Yes, that was a confusing insert, and I think it was well intended on the part of the applicant. I think what the applicant was intending to show is the original design, which is a flat roof, clearly because it's flat, clearly measured at 30 feet in height, and if they provided a 2.5-story building with a sloping roof, for the sloping roof, the height is measured at the midpoint between the eave and the ridge, and even though that the midpoint would be at 30 feet, the top of the roof would be at 34 feet, so it's actually more massing on a sloped roof. And I think that was the intended message, but it was when we processed the application to put it in the report, there was some confusion. But I want to be very clear. The applicant fully intends both buildings to be flat roofs.
Thank you, Brent.
Does anyone else have any questions? Yep, Mr. Tagle.
Does the 50% transparency for the buildings facing Wattle Roads only apply to the northernmost building, or does it apply to both buildings?
The northernmost building.
So it's the building immediate to the right-of-way?
Yes. Correct.
I guess the other question I have, if I could, knowing that the future of that road might take away all of that landscaping, have we seen any design of what's going to happen to the front of those buildings or how that's really going to impact this development?
So if you look at the slide,
Yep.
there's still significant landscaping between the building and the sidewalk. You can, for whatever reason, my pointer's not working. There it is. All along here, there's a number of trees here in this area. But the sidewalk is essentially here, and the proposed trees There's still going to be significant trees in front of that.
Well, there's a requirement for trees in the right-of-way. Do the trees,
There's a requirement of trees on private property, but not in the right-of-way. When we get greenbelt trees, they're on private property.
okay. And what we see, once those trees in the yellow are removed, they comply with that requirement?
Yes.
Does anyone else have any questions, or should we invite the applicant up? All right, we're ready for you.
I'm out. The IT person, the video person, how much time do you need?
Probably only 5 minutes. We have an audio issue we want to fix before we go any further, just so the audience can hear everything.
Okay,
We'll go ahead and take a 5-minute recess then. Thank you.
thank you. I'm going to turn the microphone off.
People on the
Please.
live stream, right?
Sorry.
Right now it's on.
We might be here till 11:57.
I don't know how accurate this is. This is garden level, and this is entry level, so it's not even close. Yeah. Well, and it brings up another issue about people getting out of there if this is their exit.
You want to test it or is it good?
Right, yeah.
Testing, 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 testing. Good? Good.
All right, that was fast.
Wall, because stepping it up still doesn't change the, still.
All right, go ahead and come on up. It's 7:40. We're going to start again.
Good evening, Madam Chairwoman and honorable members of the Planning Commission. My name is Richard Atto. I'm the property owner. And with me this evening, my wife Dolores, my nephew and partner Brian Nager, Stacy Hadid, the architect, Greg Bono, our engineer, and I see we're just joined by Keith, who's also works with us. So as we all know, we're talking about the property at southwest corner of Waddles and John R., but hope everybody can hear me. I wanted you to allow me to commence by just outlining the project's history. So we're a small family business, and over 40 years ago, and that makes me old, another family member owned a very small party store there and operated that store. And then myself, subsequently, with some additional family members, and again, this was well over 40 years ago, purchased the site and began construction of an approximately 10,000 square foot retail building, which was anchored by, I don't know if anybody remembers, Paul's Wine Cellar, which was another family venture. And I finally recall working with the building inspector on the job, who happened to be Gary Shripka, who later on went on to become the assistant city manager. So we go back a long ways in the city. And at the time that Paul from Paul's Wine Cellar retired, the building experienced significant vacancy, which led us to reconfigure the premises to accommodate the Rite Aid drugstore, along with another small retail space at the southern portion of the building. But throughout all those years, the property to the east remained vacant, as I harbored intentions of developing the property within the family and consistently rebuffed numerous offers from prospective buyers. So therefore, after decades of anticipation, I'm delighted to present our vision for the property with great enthusiasm. So it was another few years back in 2021, while constructing the Phoenix apartment project on East Big Beaver, on behalf of young Mr. Nager, because I can say that because when I was building for his father, he was about 4 years old. I realized that the type of product that we were building there was in demand, and it would be a great fit for the Waddles site, especially since the project was quite well received and it was leasing successfully. And believe it or not, I first broached the subject with Mr. Savadan back in 2021. I think the node even had different requirements back then. So while the ordinance was evolving and the proposal was coming more into focus for me, I started to formulate a specific design, mostly at the kitchen table and usually at night. So having been aware of some of the challenges in other nodes, I very deliberately wanted to place myself in the position of any of our neighboring residents and ask myself, what would I prefer if I were to look at and be a neighbor to this development? And some of the items that I listed, and the first one is low profile, low profile, low profile. I just did not want to see a pitched roof with high massing. I wanted to make sure it was low. I thought about, I'd want a quiet use. I'd want it to be as far from my property as possible. I'd want there to be abundant landscaping. And I would want unique architecture. I would want it to be family friendly and a development that could integrate with the community but not be isolated. And it's also, I would want an attractive buffer between my home, if I was a resident, and the intersection. And another thing that's important to me, I don't know if it's important to others, but I would want something that's under local ownership and management so that it's maintained by somebody who lives in the area. And generally speaking, I would want a development that might enhance my property value. And then I imagined, like, who's our market? And I thought, well, for sure, possibly existing Troy residents that may want to downsize, or new families that want to reside in the city of Troy for all its first-class amenities and schools. It wasn't an hour ago that I read an article that Troy is number 6 in the top 10 schools in the whole state of Michigan. Possibly active seniors and singles that might relocate to Troy for multiple job opportunities. I understand there's going to be a massive development at Maple and Coolidge, and there's going to be a lot of folks looking for place to live, and then also other apartment dwellers who just want more open space. So we tried to design for a diverse cross-section of folks, and we tried to incorporate the attributes that I mentioned in our design, and but we also wanted to, more importantly, honor the spirit and the intent of the neighborhood node ordinance, because the neighborhood node ordinance was created, I'd say recently, in the past maybe 10 years, with specific intent, and there was a spirit, and we wanted to honor that spirit and intent. So at this time, I'd like to invite Stacy to help demonstrate our vision through the several slides that she created that we prepared, and then, of course, answer any questions that any member of the commission or staff may have, or we could discuss those after the presentation. And I want to, at this point, thank Mr. Savadan for the presentation that he made, which I appreciate very much. And thank you for letting us be here.
Thank you. I brought handouts. Okay, go ahead. Thanks. Thank you. Do you have enough? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Stacy Hadid, and I'm proud to be here tonight to help represent the Waddle Square Apartment Project. And thank you all for being here. I appreciate what you guys are doing by serving the community. I'm a member of the Construction Board of Appeals for Shelby Township, so I really value, helping our communities and making sure that good design solutions happen. A little bit about me: I've been a licensed practicing architect since 2009. I'm a University of Michigan graduate with my master's and my Bachelor of Science, and I also graduated from Ferris State with an associate's degree before that. And I've worked in architecture firms for over 15 years, and right now I'm a sole proprietor. And I worked for Integrated Design Solutions. You guys are probably familiar with Integrated Design Solutions in Troy. And I have a lot of multifamily housing experience because I also worked for a company based in West Michigan called Hogarty Young that does a lot of multifamily, affordable and market rate. So I guess enough about me. I just wanted to share the plans that we've been making for this multifamily project here in Troy. And, it's our vision to create a vibrant, welcoming community for people of diverse age, cultural background, and ability to enjoy living in the city of Troy. So what we've designed is 2 buildings with 54 living units. And it's 2.5 stories, a basement with 2 stories above. So building 1 has 26 total units, and building 2 has 27 total units. And the top story, those are all flat units. And the other units, when you walk in, they're actually 2-story units. You go down to the bedroom level and up to the living levels. So here's the site plan. And you can see the nice landscaping, and hopefully this helps clarify a little bit, you can see the Rite Aid. I know that the site plans that were included actually did kind of show better, like how the Rite Aid commercial building relates to the two buildings. But Building 1 is the one to the north, and it actually has a void that cuts right through the building, so you can walk through the building to get to the parking area from the sidewalk along Waddles. And Building 2 is to the south. There's abundant, I feel like a lot of this is going to be redundant. Brent covered a lot of it, so I'll kind of go quickly and not waste time. There's 20% of the site area is required for general site landscaping, and we've got 35%, so that's 175% of the requirement. 69 screening trees were required, 69 were provided, 14 parking lot trees were required and provided, in the green belt along Waddles, 11 were required and provided. And here's the landscape calculations from the landscape plan issued March 6th. 154 spaces are required and 155 were provided, including 7 ADA spaces. And so here's the site plan with, you can see the 7 ADA spaces. Excuse me. And again, here's the parking information from the site plans that were sent on March 6th. We haven't really talked a lot about traffic circulation, but we did want to point out that there are 3 access points to this site. And so if you had all of the parking spaces filled, that would be 155 spaces. And you divided that into the 3 different access points, you'd have 51, 52, and 52 as compared to the development to the north and adjacent, that when you kind of calculate how many cars potentially could be accessing those points, it's nice that we have so many access points. Here's a 3D view looking at the site in relation to neighboring buildings. And here's one from the west looking east. You can kind of see the outline of the former Rite Aid there, and the houses in the background. And then from the east looking west, and I tried to, actually, I counted the bricks of neighboring houses and tried to kind of accurately represent the residential homes nearby, so you can kind of get a sense of our building in relation to some of the residences nearby. It doesn't appear to be too big and massive, comparatively speaking, from a height perspective anyhow. And then I've got some information here to explain a gable roof. You know, the height of the gable roof building, you don't measure to the top of the peak, you measure halfway between, which Brent explained to us already. And then here's from the zoning ordinance, the basement, story, half-story graphics. This is kind of what we have right here, which I think everybody understands now. The reason that this graphic was included was to help illustrate that we'd prefer to not have the sloped roof. Along the Waddles elevation, you can see there's balconies, there's entrance doors, there's awnings, sidewalks, and there's a void opening to help connect pedestrians. And so, you know, the interesting thing is that actually the north and south elevations are the same, because there's fronts on both sides, really. It's double loaded, the units are back to back. So it isn't like this is not the front, they're both kind of the front, relatively speaking. The materiality, and we've got 2 different tones of brick, burnished smooth concrete block, metal siding, and metal siding that looks like wood. Here's another view from Waddles. And I took away some of the trees to help you see the building better, so that's kind of more like what it'll be when the right-of-way trees aren't included. But this helps illustrate the void through Building 1. Basement level plan. The second level flats We've got 2 stairwells that take you down, and then a corridor with units on both sides. Building 2 includes an ADA apartment unit, and you'll walk in and there's a lift that takes you up or down. Here's the entrance view that helps illustrate the balconies. Some of the site amenities include a dog park. Right now, you see a chain link fence, but we actually talked today about having it be a metal slat fence instead that would be more visually appealing. But we're trying to provide some nice site amenities, like an outdoor plaza where people can gather and have barbecues. Here's the elevation for Building 2, much like Building 1. And we did include the transparency calculations, but like Brent was saying, there were a lot of communications happening. And so the south transparency calculations, we're at 41%. We're hoping that the transparency alternatives can be applied. And the way I devised the calculation might be different. The 2-foot to 8-foot range, I didn't see that, but I was going from grade to a 9-foot ceiling, so that could help actually. And then for the west facade, we're actually at 17%, and 30% was technically required. And the east facade is also at 15%. And the north facade it passes. Unless this is just some of the stuff that we were, the narratives that we were including. I can read through them. We sincerely believe that we meet the intended purpose of the neighborhood node category. Multifamily apartment buildings inherently support social neighborhoods through increased density. This increased density creates a robust and livable community. For our site, being surrounded by single-family homes, this results in a more diverse community. Additionally, our neighborhood node is a site that will be combined with the neighboring commercial retail site, formerly Rite Aid. Thus, it is a mixed-use project. We are providing gathering spaces for residents and their guests with the community patio, the dog park, and the void garden space in the center of Building 1. Basic living needs for the residents will be provided through the apartment building and the site, while also generous outdoor areas and on-site parking will be provided for residents. Residents will have access to multiple services provided on-site necessary for daily living. Furthermore, the project location lends itself to easy and walkable access to nearby retail and has close proximity to services provided by the City of Troy. I'm not going to read through all this, but the community building, here's the plan for the community building. It's a portion of the existing Rite Aid building. And just note, the building is 94% 28'8", and it's just those stair towers that go up to 30 feet. So we're a little bit under. And we've already kind of talked about this with Brent. You know, we could try to add some posts and guards at the balconies to help make them more visually obtrusive, but that's kind of sad because we don't need it structurally. So I guess it's a conversation, you know, and then we did happen to find some other properties that have, in this case, they're adding site stairs and they are manipulating the grade and kind of carving into it to create garages. And we also found this property at Rochester and Big Beaver. That's it, yeah. And thank you all.
Thank you. I appreciate the background and also this presentation, because a lot of these renderings were not able to come through to us because of the size of the file. So,
Yeah.
so some of it we're seeing for the first time. I'm going to open it up for questions for you guys from some of the commissioners. Yep, Mr. Fox?
I'm more asking this question for the sake of, I was confused by this at first, so I feel like it's worth stating for the benefit of anybody who may be watching. So just to be clear, the first floor, they're two-level apartments, like they're 2 stories, air quotes, with one of them being a basement. That's like the living room space, and then bedrooms are up above that? Or
That's correct, so it would,
balcony and garden area are paired together in one unit?
which makes a unit, so, by the way, we're taking applications tonight, too. So
Well,
so when you go down, that's typically the master bedroom,
Okay.
and it has a building compliant egress window, and it just gives you more room and more privacy and more closet space and whatever, and there's also room for furnace and a laundry room. And then on the main level, it's usually a living room, the kitchen, the eating area, and in most cases a den, and a few cases where they're on the end where you can have an egress window, then it could be a second bedroom. So yes, you need both of those levels to have a unit. And then to get to the units on top, on the second level, there's a stair tower, one on each end. And I think Stacy mentioned that to make that stair tower more prominent, excuse me, that's 30 feet. So when we say the building is 30 feet, this much of it is 30 feet. The rest of the building is 28 and a half feet, or 28 feet, 8 inches. So the building is even lower. And that's, again, by design. We just didn't want to impose on the neighbors.
While we're on this topic, I'd like to ask a question, because I was seeing this for the first time. I didn't realize that the upstairs where the units are ranch style in the sense that they're units 1 floor, but on the second floor, those are going to be accessed from east and west towers by stairs and a lift?
There's no lift for the second floor units. The only lift is where the ADA is, you can come in on grade, and the lift will take you to the living area floor or to the sleeping area.
Okay.
Goes up and down.
Okay, so if you want to go up to the any unit on the top, it's stairs on the east and west side, and there's a center hall that you would access your room
Right,
sort of apartment
which is
style.
very similar to what we did at the Phoenix, where you go up the stairs to get to those levels, and there's a corridor. So the folks who live on the main level have their own entrance door. Everybody has their own door to go in and out of. The folks that live on the second floor have a common door, and they go up to a common corridor, and then your locked door will be within that interior corridor.
Okay, and then one other question about that. So my understanding is, because initially I thought that there was each unit was the full width of the building, but now I'm to understand that there's a unit on the south side and the north side of each building.
Back to back.
Back to back. So if you have the building facing north and you park in the parking lot, you have to walk around to get into your unit?
We started that way, and then it was actually Brent's suggestion that we create an opening, so that opening allows you to walk right through the building to get to the front. Plus, it creates more open space, plus it allows for more landscaping, benches, places to sit. So it ended up, of course, we lost units, but again, we're not here to see how many units we can rent. We're here to see if the space is attractive to the market that we're trying, and I think that opening in the building did a lot for the building, for the looks of the building, for the usability, and of course for carrying a bag of groceries, not having to go around the whole building.
Okay, but what about
For the idea.
What about the southern building, though, because it doesn't have that same access?
Right, but you can park on both sides of that one.
Oh, okay.
So the folks that are on the south side of the south building will park on their side and
Right,
vice
okay,
versa.
yeah, okay. Okay, that clarified that for me. Anyone else? Yep, Ms. Mulholland.
I have 2 questions for you. The first one is, in the packet that you just gave, and probably it is also on your slides, you have the ADA spots, parking spots.
Yes.
2 of those parking spots are in front of the Rite Aid. currently.
Yeah, those are the ones required for the retail space.
Correct.
Yeah,
So,
I was just adding it all up for the site, but the appropriate number is there for the housing portion.
so leaving the Rite Aid one aside, because that's already an existing building, in-use building, just for the proposed site, we have 5 spots. Is 5 spots compliant with the site plan?
That's the requirement, so the calculation is based on, first, the number of units dictates how many parking spaces you need, then the number of parking spaces, that formula dictates how many handicap spaces we need, and we only originally had 4, and we were advised that we needed 5, so now we have the 5 to meet the ordinance.
Page
I just want to...
9 of the packet includes the parking calculation.
I just want to mention, in case anybody that didn't realize, but the Rite Aid abruptly closed the store. They didn't even notify us as the landlord, they just closed it. And obviously, it's a permanent closure. So just in case you're wondering what we plan to do, short term, we'd like to lease it again to an appropriate use that fits within the ordinance, but long term, maybe it's a blessing, because when the master plan is amended and the new node guidelines are set forth, we'd like to develop that in accordance with the new neighborhood node guidelines and make it even, it's already a mixed use, but we want to make it even more mixed if we can, once we see what the final outcome is of your new ordinance.
That segues into my second question. What's the parking arrangement? Because I am told that the parking arrangement is between the two, the one to be built and the one that is already there. Are we intending to do that,
Well, the sites are under similar ownership, same ownership with different entities, so we're going to combine the sites. But even though you share parking, that doesn't mean you can't have enough parking just because you're sharing it. So you have to be able to have enough parking as if the building was standalone, and you have to have enough parking. And the fact that you share them doesn't mean you get to have less. It just means that somebody parks on one side, maybe the spot that you wanted wasn't available, but we're not diminishing the amount of parking that's actually required.
So these apartments, do they come with designated parking spots? Like some?
Typically, it's just first come, first serve.
Okay.
Because if it's designated, let's say, sometimes people have guests, and then the guests have nowhere to park because somebody's, designated and there's no car there, but yet nobody can. So it's not normal unless you're in some kind of a high rise where they have a parking deck and they have designated guest parking versus, luckily here with the different mixed uses and shared uses, there'll be times when you need more parking and then the retail is closed, or that's kind of the beauty of shared parking also.
Okay. If I may, just one last question. What's the rationale behind these garden apartments? I'm familiar with them. But not in a suburban place. I'm familiar in urban pockets. I've seen plenty of them. What's your rationale behind building one in this particular area?
First of all, when we read the ordinance, and I think we almost have it memorized, it's creativity, it's urban, we're after that, a different look for the city, but not a different look that's in conflict with the ordinance, a different look that's embodying the spirit of the ordinance. Be creative, keep the massing down, if you ask me what the biggest problem with this whole development, it's my personal risk that maybe it won't be acceptable and they'll be hard to lease. I don't know that, but I wanted to do something that's unique. I wanted to keep it lower profile, and we looked at many, many options along the way, and I just think that this will be attractive to a lot of people. If you, not knocking anybody's work, but if you go down Maple and Coolidge and you have massive steps going here and to me, I don't like that. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see a pitched roof that overpowers the house. And if you go to the Rochester and Big Beaver site, same thing. You have a door and you have to go down, you have steps, the railings after railing after railing. believe that we have a unique product that meets the requirement as far as our requirement, not just the city's requirement, to be lower profile, and I'm hoping it'll be successful. That's my risk that I'm taking, but I believe in the product. Your planners have urged me to go back to something different, and I said, let me make my case. This is what I want. I think it's better for the neighborhood, and I believe that. I continue to believe it.
Mr. Faison?
I think you just touched on it, but can you go to the 2 pictures of the examples of Troy buildings with lower level apartments?
How do you make it go back, though? It's stuck.
Oh, I don't know how.
You don't necessarily need to do that since I have the paper, so if...
What page are you on?
The last, I think it's the last 2 pages.
This one.
Or the 2 of the last 3 pages, I guess.
Okay, yep.
Are you looking at this one?
It's these 2.
Okay.
Bullet 15.
You're right, and I was basically trying to understand. You said they're buildings with lower level apartments, so are they below grade like your proposed project, or I'm just trying to understand how these are oriented versus what you're proposing?
I think that if you look at the windows between
Which one do
the
you want?
stairs,
I've never been in this unit, but I know that if I go into this door, if I don't go down, I'll be at the floor line that you can see here. So it's a similar situation where you have to walk in the door and go down, and then to go up, they just put the stairways outside.
But it looks like the unit is at grade level, though, is that right?
What happens when you skip a meeting?
You know, I see it, if you look at this page that they're showing, if you look to the left, they're sort of hiding it, but there is an egress, there is a basement window. So I think his point is when you go into the door without walking up the stairs, when you enter, you're going down.
Which is exactly what we're doing, but because they have the other stair outside, what they probably have is the one that you go down as a unit and the one you go up as a unit, whereas ours is a 2-story unit. When you rent the unit, you take possession of both floors. In that particular case, the door that's at grade, that tenant goes down to their unit, and the tenant above goes up the exterior steps to their unit. So it's similar about how the 2 floors are set up, but in that case, it's 2 separate tenants versus 1 tenant having 2 floors.
Okay, and then is it the same for the
I just
other?
wanted to show it because I was asked by staff if we have anything in the city, and I didn't, I said, not that I know of, and then all of a sudden it hit me when I saw the door. It's like, wait a minute, you have to go down. That's what we're doing, and you have to go up. The only difference is 1 tenant versus 2.
and these stairs are on the outside.
And then the second building, the second picture, the one at Maple and Coolidge, is that?
The second building, the rears have the doors, but if you look on the front, it's similar where
This one has the garages
Right, I see that.
in the lower, they're technically in the lower level.
Okay, I see.
okay.
Mr. Fox?
Shifting gears slightly, I was curious if I could ask some questions about the community center you guys are proposing. I see on the diagram that you provided examples of both, like, kind of looks like a workout space, but then also like a community gathering space. I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little more on that, because I don't necessarily see both of those things happening in the same space, if that makes sense. So I guess what are the thoughts on the community center as a whole?
What's the question?
So is your question, you're kind of questioning why we would, if it would really make sense to have the workout equipment
With a
in the same
lounge
room
space,
with
like
a
that's my
lounge.
thing, is if I'm lounging, I'm thinking sweaty people on the bikes a couple feet from me. I guess the way I see it, that room would be one or the other, not necessarily both. So I guess that's what I'm asking.
Well, again, using the Phoenix Apartments as a model where we have a small community building, which is it's bigger than this area, but there's double the tenants or more than double. So a portion of that building has exercise equipment, but it is separated, and we may end up having to do that here, just by a glass wall for privacy or noise. But presumably, if I'm a resident and I have a small party and I'm going to have friends, I don't have very many friends, but if I had a few more friends over, I doubt if anybody would want to work out while we're having that event. And, you know, usually when it's a smaller community, that people know each other, and if it becomes a problem, then it becomes a management issue where you'll have to reserve the space. But the project is not big and dense enough to have a large area for one and a second large area for the other, and you don't want to not have one or the other.
Does anyone else have questions?
I've got a
Yep,
couple.
Mr. Kran?
All right, going back to the plan view for the ones that face Waddles. So if I live in the apartment that's on Waddles Road, my car is parked in that area behind the building, you know, so I do have to walk around. There are no garages, I take, right?
No garages at this point,
So
no.
we're all scraping snow and ice, okay. So that said,
But I don't know if you recall, but you don't have to walk around because there's a wide opening right through the building.
oh yeah, but still, you've got to walk, if I'm parked here, I got to walk through that tunnel and then over to my front. There's no parking right in front of my door.
If you live at the east end, there's parking. If you live at the west end and you go through what you call the
Yeah,
tunnel,
okay.
you'd have to go walk to the west, yes.
Okay. The next thing has to do with the lower levels, the basement areas. Now, I'm familiar with Brooklyn with their lower level, and they usually have a stairway down into that lower level from the sidewalk. A couple concerns about that. I like the idea of doing something to protect a stray kid from backing up, catching a ball and falling backwards and hitting his head on the concrete. That's a worry to me. And the other issue is, if a raccoon got in that hole, they can't climb out. You know, they're gonna jump in. We got a lot of wildlife around this area.
I have raccoons at my house.
Yeah, so
I have a
you
window
don't-
well, a regular metal window well, and I've had to fish dead raccoons out of
Yeah,
there.
I
but
understand. So what do we, good, I'm glad you.
Absolutely.
So that's an issue to me, to have that many wells with no access for animals to get out. I mean, I've seen deer doing stupid stuff like falling into, you know, holes they can't get out of.
So
We've got a lot of deer.
The opening is required for egress. However, you can have some kind of a grating that you could, with a hinge that you could open. So now, if there's a fire and I get out that egress window, I can stand in there and open, and it would be code compliant, and get out. So now the kids can't fall in or the animals can't fall in. It would be a grating, open grating, so you still have air circulation. If you open the window, you still have the light, and yet you have the protection, and it's still safe to get out of. And that's, you know, those kind of details.
I see it as an animal trap. That's my basic thought, looking at it. And the red columns and the one guardrail helps a bit, but it's not going to prevent animals from getting in there.
No, that's why I said the grating, you
You
know.
gonna put grading around the whole thing then?
No, on the surface.
Oh, that's interesting.
So that way you don't see it.
Oh.
In the old days, the grating was strictly steel. Now they make them out of fiberglass, so they're much lighter, and you could hinge them and open them.
Yeah.
And they make them in black, they make them in green.
Okay.
I use it on homes all the time where they have an egress window and they have kids.
Yeah.
And you put a fiberglass grating in there. So it's strong enough to, you could stand on it, it won't collapse on you, but yet it's light enough to move if you have a fire egress situation.
I'd still like to see something that prevent a kid running through the grass and hitting his head on that balcony. You know,
I mean, a lot of balconies, even on single-family residential, are raised up. I can probably find hundreds of them in the
how high,
city.
what height is that, the bottom of that balcony at?
It's about 3.5 feet.
Yeah, okay.
So if you're, a young kid will go underneath it, and he'll end up on the grating, and if you're older, then it's at your eye level. I mean, Many,
I'm not
many,
too worried
many
about-
residential decks.
People have learned the lesson already, but, you know, a 6-year-old or 8-year-old, they quite haven't learned yet. And I could just see a kid running, chasing the ball, and whack, you know, head injury right there. So that kind of concerns me, that area for kids. So again, I would like to see something, I like the red railing, something to let them know, because the black kind of disappears in a kid's mind. You know, I was a kid once, I remember these things. And that just looks like a hazard to me as a parent. So I'd like those red columns, I'd like the red handrail, I'd like to see something there. It doesn't have to be red, it could be some other color, great yellow, I don't, you know, whatever. But I'm just saying, to me, there should be something there to warn a child that's running, and they do run. So that kind of, I'd like to see something there to protect the kids.
If it's appropriate for this body, you know, we can leave that with the planner, and we can work out, there's multiple ways that we can propose it.
And then the snow removal, there's obviously a drain at the end of the bottom of that pit, so, but, you know, snow we've had, you know, once in 2-3 years, we get a foot or foot and a half of snow, and I realize that balcony is going to stop most of it, but, you know, we do get wind and drifting, and I'm just wondering, you know, how do you handle the snow that gets down there?
So every single one will have to have its own drain tied into a storm system, and then it'll drain away into the storm. Usually the snow doesn't stay there because it's much warmer below grade, but the water is more of a problem than the snow, and that's why each one will have its own individual drain.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Tagle?
You had mentioned a horizontal grading. Could you go, well, I guess that shot's good. Are you suggesting a horizontal grading at the top of that little concrete wall that barriers the terrace?
It's an option. What I've done before is that concrete band that's around, we actually put a little notch in it, and the grading sits flush with it.
So people couldn't come out on the terrace and enjoy the outdoors?
No, this is the grading on the egress well that's there for if there was a fire and you needed to get out of the...
Sure. Can you point that out to me? Just so.
I'm going to try it on here, I guess. It would be over those areas, the window well areas,
exactly.
The grading over the top.
And you're aware that because of the difference in grade from your grade level or your lower level floor line to the grade, you are going to need a guardrail there. The code is going to require that. Now, that's not for this body's purview.
We're going to need...
I think we might be below that threshold.
It's 30 inches. Anything more than 30 inches requires a guardrail. But again, that's not our purview. That'll be the building department when you apply for permits. But I'm just saying, you know, we haven't talked about transparency yet. And if it is a guardrail, what is it made out of? How may that affect the transparency number that you're not meeting currently? I don't remember the exact number.
Does the guardrail on the upper level?
No, the guardrail's on the lower level.
Transparency? No, but we have a guardrail for the balconies. Would that be impacting our transparency calculation?
I don't know. That's a question.
Okay.
That's a question.
Yeah.
And
I want to make one point about that too, respectfully. Usually along walkways is when you're required to have those guardrails. But
well, I know your renderings show grass, but I know your site plan shows the walkway awful close to those. And I think the code reads within 3 feet of a walking surface. But I could be wrong. I don't have the code
there's a little
memorized.
bit there's a buffer, but yeah.
Have you considered increasing the transparency to meet the 50% and to meet the, what's the transparency on the end units, 30?
30 when it's abutting parking.
Have you considered increasing the transparency?
Absolutely, we have considered it. So
Made a lot of adjustments
the north
to get to 41.
the north elevation that requires 50% is at 41 or 42, and I could easily increase it to 50%, but I think it'll be detrimental to the overall look of a residential type. I mean, we could do it.
Love to see it.
Just more, make the door walls wider, make them taller, but it takes away from, I believe that everything is about scale.
Well, that's where the creativity comes in.
Pardon me?
The creativity comes in, making it work. I mean, in our profession, we have a lot of rules that we have to live by and design around. And the creativity is how do you accomplish meeting those requirements and still making it a beautiful building?
In my opinion, the alternatives are more beautiful than having the more glass, but if you said this project is subject to approval contingent upon 50%, that's your...
No, I didn't say that, but you were the one that said you could do it. So
I could do it.
I'd like to see it.
I could do it.
And I'd also like to see the consideration for how are you going to solve that railing or that guardrail issue from the walking surface down to that terrace level? Because I think that's something you need to consider at this point. You know.
Mr. Savedant, did you want to step in? I don't want to put you on the spot, but you were making a face. Okay, so I'll just say that I had the same concerns about that and wondered about that hole. And I think that I was also under the misconception, because I was like, oh, you could make a tiered step and have a little garden. But I was thinking that it was a walkout, and I'm understanding now it is a window. So it's not really a garden where people are coming out and have a little garden space, correct?
It's a small area, and it's the whole purpose of it is to make the egress of that bedroom down there a legal egress.
Correct.
There's
And to
certain
let
requirements.
sunlight in, I imagine, to let natural light in. That's another advantage, I would say. I don't know, I had asked actually about whether there were any code issues with that, and I was under the impression that it complied, but I was thinking that maybe some landscaping around that hole to sort of buffer people from walking and falling in, or a dog or an animal or a child.
The landscaping would be nice, but it wouldn't actually prevent an animal or a child from falling in, but the grading would, and the grading doesn't detract from any transparency issues, or it would eliminate the need for a railing, because the railing is if you can fall in the hole, and the grading is acceptable method to keep you from falling in. So if I had my choice, and again, if we want to discuss it, I would propose a grading that's flush with that curb that surrounds the egress window. We can add landscaping if desired, and then I would propose, if the board is not happy with the transparency alternatives, more glass.
I mean, personally, I really like the design of the building. I like the flat roof. The transparency, I understand we do have the requirements in the code.
But you also have the ability to accept alternatives.
Correct.
In some cases, you don't have the ability where it requires a variance, but in this case, it's your...
Correct. And because of the basis, on the basis that it is residential, I don't know that I necessarily want to, because I thought about the opaque windows surrounding the doors could be stretched out further and let in and provide more transparency, but I don't know that that's necessarily a good thing for the residents who live there, or visually, which is sort of the point of the rule. The point of the transparency is to see in, but in the node, when we're putting residential on ground floor, it doesn't make sense really. So I'm okay with a little bit of leniency on that.
In my opinion, the transparency is also, again, unfortunately, the neighborhood node, when its authors had to create this document, they had to consider commercial and residential. So when you have a larger commercial building that doesn't meet the transparency, you're looking at a wall, and we don't want that. Even if there's nothing to see inside, we don't want to see a blank wall. So actually, I don't even know the answer, but is spandrel glass even considered part of the transparency? In some communities, it is. So you don't want to see a wall. So that's why I believe somebody intended, well, if I'm not looking at a flat wall, but there's other alternatives, so it breaks up the building, because it's part of it is seeing in what's going on, but not really applicable to residential, and part of it is not seeing a giant blank wall. So taking, in this case, because there's so many different alternatives, it would be way easier to add more glass if it was a flat wall, but because we created all these ins and outs, different materials, horizontal, vertical, awnings, balconies, it would, and just, it's my opinion, you don't have to agree with me, that if we added 50, got the transparency up to 50%, I don't think it would look as good. That's my opinion. But I'm telling you, yes, I can do it. I just don't agree with it.
I'm going to go to Mr. Buechner next, yep.
A couple of questions. So we talked about the Rite Aid, and then there's some other commercial businesses, and when I drove by there, I missed it, but what are the other commercial businesses?
Oh, there's no businesses in there at this time. It's, right now, the building's 100% vacant.
Okay, and you said you have plans to look at some retail ideas?
I said that we would, our goal is to find a tenant or two short-term, but ultimately, once the new ordinance is in place for the neighborhood node that talks about what's allowed, we would like to propose redeveloping and maybe have some more units above it and maybe different retail units. Right now, we don't have the transparency on that building. We'd want to bring it up to the new requirements so that it matches what we're doing. But in the short term, we'd like to find a tenant.
Okay, thank you. A couple other questions. I'm sorry, this is a real detailed one. You don't need to go to page 2, but page 2 says you have 26 units and 27 units, which totals...
It should be 27 and 27.
Okay. As I do the math, I see 12, 4, and 10, which is 26. So what are we just missing one in there?
I hope not.
Page 2, building 1, 12, 1 bedrooms, 4, 2 bedrooms, 10, 2 other bedrooms, which totals 26. I don't mean to be nitpicky with one.
Yeah,
I'm a math guy, and I like
this table is what we have to...
So one of them, there's 1 plus 1, and that's the difference.
I'm going to guess, without looking at the floor plan, that the table is inaccurate, because I'm pretty sure we have 54 units. Quite sure. So I can look on the floor plan.
It's plus 1, and there's probably, was that one? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, plus 1.
Okay, somewhere. My next question, did you reach out to the neighbors?
I did not.
Okay.
I reached out to the planning secretary to get names of the associations, but I didn't get those, and I didn't follow up to get them any other way.
Okay. One other, just a detail I saw in the drawings, the outdoor plaza area, and I think that's a cool idea. Is there a drawing to see it, or?
Absolutely.
I missed it. Gotcha. That's close.
Is the plaza area right next to the dog
cool
park,
idea.
or are they separate?
They're opposite. The plaza is at Building 1, and the dog park's at Building 2.
Thank you.
Is that, we're looking, what, is this west looking east?
Further to the left is Waddles.
So, wait, let me look at the same thing you're looking at. Further to the left is Waddle.
Yeah.
So this is west.
That's the west end of building,
the north
west
one.
end of building 1?
Yes, that's the west end of Building 1.
Okay.
And the other thing that's nice about that is we put our air conditioning units there, and we screen them with masonry walls to match the building. Masonry walls actually create more privacy for the gathering area. So it's a dual, it screens the units, but also
Can help to enclose it a little bit.
encloses the plaza area.
Thank you. Yep, Mr. Fox.
Just because I want to make sure I'm 100% clear on this, what is the distance between the top of one of those holes and the bottom of one of those holes? Like in the garden level, like what is the distance between the top and the bottom? Because Because I know we've talked about a couple different, like people falling in or like animals. I just want to make sure I understand how deep that depth actually is.
I have a section in here, I'm
I
gonna
have
pull
a
it up.
full-size
4 or
plan.
5 feet, I think.
I've been scrolling through here like
Thought it was
mad trying to
3'8".
find a
We
measurement
have
on
too many
the
slides. It's
circled in red.
It's slide number 40.
slide.
Oh, actually, no. It isn't shown on there. Well, actually, that should explain it, because the garden level
4 feet 8
is 4'8",
inches. Yeah.
but the window doesn't go down to 4'8". It's an egress window.
Okay.
So it just has to meet the egress window requirements.
So then, just for some clarity on when you were talking about potentially a fiberglass or something of that description grate over the
A
top.
grating.
How low from the, how deep would that just be, like right on top, same at ground level, or?
Flush with the grass.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I understood that correctly, because I feel like it'll come up when we're talking later.
And then it'll hinge up, right? It would hinge.
Yeah, because it has
You
to
have to be
be
able to get out.
accessible for egress with no tools and
Yeah.
and a certain amount of, minimum amount of pressure to lift it up, things like that.
Mr. Hudson?
I think I'd like to give you my impressions of what we're looking at tonight. I was a Royal Oak boy until we moved to Troy, but I got married in 1968, and our first place of residence was, I don't know if it's still there, Garden Apartments. Those were buildings, flat roofs, very much like these you see. You came in, and there was an apartment up above, one down below. With a Y, you took one down. We had the bottom apartment. That was a garden apartment we had. We had an entrance from the interior of the building, and we had large plate glass window doors opening onto a green area. We didn't have a hole dug for us. We were able to egress very easily, and we even did have a small garden. It was wonderful. There's no way I would rent one of your apartments for a couple of reasons. One, you've got a 3.5 to 4 foot concrete jail cell abutting your living area. If there were a fire, there is no way you're going to leap 4 feet over that concrete wall to get out of that apartment. And if a deer got in for sure, he's going to have to go out the front after rooting your furniture. It may work in New York. I don't think it's going to work in Troy, and I would almost be claustrophobic if I had a bottom unit apartment. And I'm not in favor of this project. I'll be the first to tell you that bottom unit, that jail cell, kills it for me. Otherwise, it looks like a pretty good plan.
Was your apartment, did you live in the bottom only? Because there's living,
Complete apartment on the bottom. There was one above us, 2
okay.
stories.
So in this case, you wouldn't be living in the bottom only because there's living space above.
Well, let me rephrase that. You got 2 separate units stacked.
No, they're not.
No.
It's one unit.
I live there. I think I ought to know where I live.
No, I'm talking about our proposal.
Shouldn't say that. Nevertheless, I don't think it's a good one.
May I speak in response?
I don't know if it's a question and answer here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Madam
go
Chair?
ahead.
Okay.
Yes, please.
I appreciate your feedback, Mr. Hudson. And I just want to clarify for the record that the apartments are 2 stories. You walk in, and it's your own entrance. You walk in, and then you can go up a half a level and get to the living area, and that's where the living room is, and you can go down a half a level. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. Because
You got a fire in the interior.
the deer would be in your bedroom. It wouldn't be in your living room.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Crown.
Relating my experience with garden apartments in Brooklyn, New York, a lot of people utilize the roof as they put in decking up there, and you know they have. So,
Yeah.
is there any access from the top apartment to the roof?
No.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Mr. Tagle.
I may have been mistaken. Tell me what the sill height is of your lower windows in that terraced area, that lower recessed area.
Whatever the code requirement, I believe it's not to exceed 40 inches
For an egress window.
Okay, so your bottom of your window is 40 inches, let's say,
above the
your
floor.
floor line.
Okay.
So from that sill, how low is your terraced area? How, you know, if you took the sill line now on your outside of the building, how low was that?
The pea stone or whatever's going to be in there, do you want to know that?
Yeah.
It'll be 6 inches below the window. And the reason is if it snows or whatever, if it was flush with the window and you had snow, it could come in the building. So we usually leave about 6 inches below the sill.
I would estimate that sill's not going to be 40 inches above the ground. It's going to be, that's the maximum. It's going to be lower than that.
Yeah,
It has to be lower than
I'm kind of looking at
that.
some of the drawings,
Yeah.
and it does show the windows. Again, I'm not sure where your lower floor line is, but it does show the windows down lower than 40
They're
inches
lower than
above the
40
floor
inches.
line.
But what Richie's
40 inches is the maximum.
The maximum for an egress
So
window.
what I wasn't understanding before was you are not going to go out into that area at all unless it's an emergency.
Oh, absolutely. So it's only it's an emergency egress requirement. You're going to go up and down the steps unless there's a fire or some other emergency and you can't get to the stairs. You can open the window and legally have an egress route.
Okay, all right. Well, you're right. You still, if you exceed 30 inches from the grade to that pea gravel or pea stone, you are going to need some type of a guardrail. And I'm not even sure if you're talking about putting a horizontal grating. Where does that fall in the egress window? I mean, you have to come out below it to push it up.
No, if you, the egress window could be a sliding window. You slide the window open and you lift the grating. It could be on, you don't have to lift the whole entire piece of grating depending on what, the window could be 4 feet and the opening could be 30 by 30.
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Malala-Holly, sorry.
In the previous home that I lived, we did have an egress window, and ours was not covered. Yes, garden rats, raccoon, and a cat fell in there, and our job was to make sure that they come out alive, and so it was our job to do that. But that aside, we did have stairs, so in case of an emergency, we come out and then we take the stairs and out. But my
Absolutely.
neighbors had the fiberglass covering, okay? That's the window egress well covers, that's what they call it, right? So the well covers, that was a fiberglass. Now, when they put the fiberglass, it looks nice, it was clear, everything. Past 4 or 5 years, they stained, they became yellowish, they did not let in as much light, and definitely the hinges were not working as well, because obviously nobody had used it as an exit, and so they had not really used that.
So
there is,
sorry.
but there are some windows that get sealed in, there are some that had those latches that you mentioned, and I'm very familiar with that. But that whole thing worked for a basement window. Here, this is a living space, this is a bedroom area we are talking about.
Absolutely.
I'm still yet to be convinced that this is a good plan for a bedroom window as opposed to a basement egress window.
Well, the reason they require basement egress windows is so you could have a bedroom in a basement, because it would be illegal to sleep in the basement without an egress. So first of all, the first comment, there's hundreds of window wells that are egress legal and they have no covers on them. And there's also plenty that have the fiberglass. The problem with the fiberglass is it doesn't allow any air in there. So if you open the window, you're not going to get any air because it's sealed. That's why the grating, when you open it, if it's raining, there's rain there. If it's sun, it'll come there because it's open. It's not a fiberglass clear plastic that can yellow and turn black and get dirty and you have to worry about cleaning it. As long as you can get out for egress, that's why I would never propose fiberglass on any residential or this project for the coverage. It's a bad idea.
Mr. Lambert?
Yeah, one quick question, and then one that's going to take a little bit of time on your part. The first, a quick question. You have no intent of tearing down that Rite Aid building right now. You want to rent it out in the short run?
I have no intent to tear it down right now. I'd like to run it in the short term, but if something happened and somebody had a proposal, I mean, I'm not going to say it'll never be torn down, but that's absolutely not the intent.
The second question, I guess, is an opening statement. I think this is a very attractive apartment building. The design works well, but to me, it looks like it belongs more down on Big Beaver than it does on Wattles. Give me your best case reason why you think this is a good transition from the commercial on John R. to the residential farther to the east.
Absolutely. It's a very good transition because it's less imposition on the neighbors. And if I, don't tell my wife, but if I wanted to live there one day and I want this style of living, I do not want to be on Big Beaver. Many, many people say, oh, this is beautiful, but I wish it wasn't on Big Beaver. I wish I had more open space. I wish I had privacy. I wish I had, other residences next to me, and I want to be able to walk to a drugstore or anything and not worry about getting run over. I think it's going to do really well. That's the risk I take, but I believe in the project. I believe in the design. I believe in the location. And why should Wattles take a second seat to Big Beaver? We know Big Beaver's a major thoroughfare, but how about our residents that don't want to live on a major thoroughfare?
I'm going to ask another question. I wondered about the space with, I'm now realizing that entire Rite Aid is, I thought there was a hair salon, but that's not.
It's been gone for a while.
Okay. So given that you have that vacant building, would you consider dedicating a larger piece of that so you could do a community center and a full gym for your residents? And then as far as that outdoor space, I love the concept, but it looked like it fit 3 people there. And it also made me question the safety because it was basically in the parking lot. There were no, planters to sort of make a barrier to it, or, I'd like to see more with that space, and I'd also love to see it become more of an amenity to the neighboring apartment.
Well, it's designed to be an amenity, and the outdoor space that's immediately adjacent to the community building is definitely small, but it's also a secondary outdoor space to the larger gathering space that's more open, has furniture, has a barbecue. So if you were going to have guests or want to use it for an event, you're going to use the larger one. But if that's being used and you and a friend are working out and you just want to sit outside and you don't want, there's different cases for different things. Would I commit more space to it, like without knowing what's going to happen to the building? It'd be kind of difficult to make that commitment because I don't want to make a commitment that I may not be able to honor. I don't know who's going to come along. I don't know if it's going to stay vacant for 6 months, or if tomorrow, if this project was approved as it is, and then tomorrow somebody came along and said, look, I need the whole building, then I would at least take the equivalent of that space or more, and I'd rather lose 2 apartments and put the community building in the building and lose units than not have a tenant. It's an economic thing, but if I'm committing to that amount of space, and that amount of space will always exist, even if I have to put it somewhere else and lose rentable space, because if it's a commitment, it's a commitment. And we honor the commitment. So right now, that's what we're committing to.
Okay. I think that was all of my questions. Does anyone else have a question for the applicant before we let them sit down? Oh, yep, Mr. Hudson. Sure.
Switching horses. I think the report indicated that we're taking advantage of some parking with Rite Aid and some other concessions, an entrance. Are you proposing to put a easement into this project to preserve the entrance and the parking spots for this project?
I don't think it'll be required because it's going to be under one ownership.
Like, no, if you've got two separate tax parcels owned by one guy, you can sell one and not the other.
I believe it'll be required to be one parcel.
That's the understanding, is he's going to combine the parcels into one.
Okay, so that's part of his proposal.
Yep, Mr. Tagle.
Because the requirement is to have mixed use, and we're not voting on the commercial or the community aspect of this on the adjacent property, can we even act on this tonight? Because it does not, right now, until he combines the property, and until this is part of this development, it's not. I understand the intent.
So our thought was that requiring combination before it's even gone before the planning commission, in theory, the planning commission could deny the application, then he's gone through all the trouble of the combination. So the way we handle it is just like we handle other items, where first step is preliminary site plan approval. Once he gets preliminary site plan approval, he's not going to start any earth movement or any construction until he actually combines. So that was kind of the thinking in terms of timing. Because he doesn't know if he's going to get approved. If he gets denied for this application, that changes everything, and he may have to go in a different direction.
I understand, but you're asking us to approve something that's not factual.
Well, it's going to be a condition of approval similar to other things like it's 8:50 at night, so my brain is a little bit cloudy here, but subject to a wetlands determination prior to final approval, or subject to something else, that we don't want to necessarily have the applicant make the investment or go through the effort of doing something before he knows he's going to get approval to move forward. We're comfortable with this proposal to combine. If they get approval, one of the next steps is going to be combination.
Is that clear in the resolution?
There's notes on documents in the site plan packet. The preliminary, I believe it's a preliminary site plan drawing, has a note stating the parcels are going to be combined.
Absolutely, it does.
So that will be a condition of approval.
Anybody have questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Just a follow-up question for you, Mr. Savidan, about what Mr. Tagle was just asking. I thought maybe you were going somewhere else with this, which is making me think about it, because we had talked about this issue of we would approve it first, and then it would be contingent on rezoning, but then all of a sudden now we have an empty vacant building, which isn't providing a commercial use because it's vacant. So it's supposed to provide two of the master plan. I mean, I know it's not the zoning ordinance, but so now all of a sudden we've got a vacant building with this. Is that?
Well, the parking calculations indicate an intent for it to be retail. So we accept at face value that it's in the best interest of the applicant to not have a vacant building and to fill that with a tenant. So we assume that he's going to do his best to find a tenant that's going to be retail in nature and comply with parking, and that's his best interest to do it, and it's in the city's best interest that it not be vacant. So.
Right. And my understanding is that Rite Aid is a non-conforming building in the neighborhood node. Is that right?
From the standpoint of transparency, it was there long before the neighborhood
And it's
node.
not, and the setbacks are too far, and the parking lot's located in the wrong spot. But, so unless he were to tear down, he can keep that building, but he can go ahead and renovate, but anything that he renovates would be going towards conformity.
Exactly. If he found a tenant that indicated, Yeah, we'd like to reskin the exterior of the building. Then any exterior improvements to that building could not increase the nonconformity of the building. What typically happens is we get renovations and there's more windows put in, there's more doors put in on the street side, et cetera. So it's only, if it's renovated, it's only going to be equal to or better than in terms of compliance.
Okay, thank you. Before we go on, I'm going to give an opportunity to anyone who's here today. This isn't a public hearing, but if there's anyone in the audience who wants to come up and speak on this project, please go ahead and come on up. We'll give you 3 minutes. If you could sign your name and introduce yourself, and then I don't know if Mr. Sabanon's going to help with the timer. Thank you.
Susan Kuhn, my address is 2172 Wattles Road. I walk my dog from my house to the Rite Aid. There's a sidewalk on the south side of Wattles Road. And the Rite Aid itself has a brick wall at their far east side where they have a lot of parking. One of the comments that I heard earlier was that this new place would have 3 access points. We've only heard of 1 off of Wattles Road. So there's 2 more somewhere. Now, they did compare themselves at the beginning to the Enclave beautiful condo complex on the northeast corner. That has amazing landscaping, a berm, trees. You actually don't even know it's there. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. On Rite Aid, when you come east out of that entrance, there is the 2 acres that we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes. That is a swamp. There are ducks swimming in there. There's trees, of course, that are falling over. It's been cleaned up somewhat recently, but it's just a nice little walk down to the subdivisions. If you can put up the slide where you do actually see that, I'd appreciate it, because I do want to point out a few things on there where, keep going back.
Which specific?
The one that showed the street called Wayfarer. And it had some kind of white puffy buildings. Keep going.
This one?
Nope, 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 nope. The white, that's it right there. Okay, the far left, you can see the beginning of the word Wayfarer, and to the left of that, I'm sure, is the entrance to that subdivision. That used to be a single entrance to a subdivision with a big circle. Fairfield Wayfarer came right out, back out on Wattles Road. That's fine. It's been there a while. Beautiful subdivision. I am to the left of that, to the east. The road narrows from 2 lanes to 1 lane, which is fine because Wattles Road is not supposed to be lots of traffic, and it's a nice residential area. The puffy white houses behind the complex are the beautiful new single-family homes on John R. Now, what happened somewhat recently is that they were connected. The subdivision on Wayfarer was connected to all the new homes on John R., which are just north of the Boys and Girls Club, which is fine because that's a big park back there. Boys and Girls Club has that big track, and there is a school back there also, and they share the track. We take dogs and people and picnics and stuff back there all the time. This swampy piece of land is not as big as it looks. It's 2 acres. I own 3/4 of an acre. My next door neighbor has 1.5 acres. And you're going to put all these things in this one little swampy area east of the Rite Aid. I just think it's wrong. And where are the other 2 access points? The other thing is the parking. If I'm buying a unit there and I'm told I get 2 parking spots, I'm going to go out and claim my 2 parking spots, and I'm going to park 2 cars there all the time, or park something there all the time. And it's, are you going to have an HOA? Who's going to decide who gets what parking spot? And I just think we're just opening ourselves up to a lot of problems. What I would do is tear down the Rite Aid, make it bigger, and have more parking, and not just have it piecemeal, shoving all the stuff in this one little swampy area.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this topic? Okay, seeing no one, I'm going to turn it back to the Planning Commission for discussion. Mr. Fox?
Well, coming into this meeting, I had a good number of questions that a lot of you guys asked, and I appreciate that. I think really a lot of my concerns were kind of alleviated by having grates over the drops so that in theory, animals, people, et cetera, aren't going to flop down that 4 foot 8 inches. And then I think my other concern with the community center, it seems a little weird, but I do understand the logic of having the space be flexible for both options as opposed to limiting it to one. So overall, I think that this adds a lot. It adds a housing type that we just don't have here in Troy. Adds a lot for folks who are looking to, get into the community. And I think overall, it's a solid build. That's where I'm at.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything?
I just want a clarification.
Yes.
So there will be some kind of covering in that area. There will be some kind of covering. That is something that they will be providing. It's not optional, it will be provided, correct?
But I don't know that that's clear, but I think that if there's a resolution, we could require that. Because as of right now, I didn't see them, Mr. Sabadan, is that correct, that right now as it's been presented, unless we specify in the resolution that there must be grates, they don't have to put grates, right?
Yeah, if the Planning Commission feels like the grates are they're a site issue and the Planning Commission feels that it's a safer, better development with some type of grate, that can be a condition of approval.
Okay.
Because it's related to the site.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr.
I would
Kraft.
add too, besides the grate, I would add some kind of a guardrail, because again, I'm concerned about kids in their, eagerness to maybe chase a ball or do whatever they're doing and playing out in the yard, that they would just hit their head on that balcony. It just, I think there needs to be more than just, leave it open, I should say. The grate solves the animal problem, but I still think there should be something to prevent kids from, especially that sharp corner of the balcony. I can see a head going into there.
Anyone else?
Mr. Crane, would it, to provide some flexibility, rather than use the word grate, could we use something like appropriate protection to prevent children from hitting the balcony, or do you specifically think it's important to have guardrails?
Yeah, we can leave it open to design to where the developer wants to choose a means to protect children, but I see it as a hazard, especially that sharp corner.
Yes, Mr. Fox.
No, I support that. I think that's a really good condition to add on to the motion to approve, if and so at some point somebody makes it. I think the other thing to discuss is the transparency requirement. I know we went back and forth a bit about that. I just want to echo some thoughts that the chair had, that I do think the transparency requirement, the intention, I wasn't there when the ordinance was written, but my take on the intention was it was so that commercial properties would be more open. I think opening up residences so that there's more ability to look into there. I absolutely understand the logic of not wanting just a solid brick wall, but I feel like this face definitely provides a lot of variation. So I would be in favor of accepting the alternatives to the transparency requirement.
Yeah, Mr. Tagle.
Let me say that glass at the second floor is not a privacy issue. We're not talking about, at least I wasn't talking about loading up the lower level, bedroom with more glass, but there looks like there's a fair amount of opportunity in that elevation. And quite honestly, it's a north-facing elevation. That's the best elevation to have more glass, because you're not going to get any direct sunlight in this latitude. So I appreciate the concern. The other thing, I don't know how many of you were on the commission when we were talking about a project on Crooks Road that they were going to turn. commercial building into a residential building, and there was a lot of discussion about that first floor. What was that going to be? Was that going to be living units? Was that going to be a workout area? What it was going to be? So, this isn't the first project where we've seen living units at grade level. So, anyways, I think there's opportunity to meet the transparency requirements. And I'm not sure what the hesitation might be other than, I don't know what the hesitation might be.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Are you just thinking taller windows on the top floor, or you want them to be more creative and come up? I mean, do you have a different solution, or you want them to come back and show us what?
Well, the petitioner offered, and I suggested I would like to see that. Whether it's taller or wider, I think a lot of it depends on what kind of, what's behind the window. What's the room, so you want to think about that as you're developing the fenestration or the windows, the sizes or the shapes.
Okay. Mr. Fox?
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely a reasonable point. I'm curious, I guess I'm curious if anyone on the planning commission, because I don't want to single out a specific other person, but are you at the point where you would prefer to see this postponed, or at the point where you would be willing to approve on the condition that they meet the 50% transparency requirement? If that makes sense. I don't know if I worded that question.
If you're directing your question to me, I'm leaning on the postponement. I'd like to see what they can come back with without it being contingent upon putting that burden, putting that responsibility on the department.
I would agree with that in the sense that, we should see what it looks like, what the transparency looks like before it gets approved. Mr. Buechner,
Yeah, no, I'm in that camp as well. I think they're close. I think the empty commercial units scares me a little bit. The transparency is maybe my third of the three things I'm going to say. Mr. Hudson saying jail cells scares me a little bit with kids and animals. So I think those three things for me would be something that I would say I think you're close, but I would propose postponement and try to improve it a little bit better. That's my opinion.
Yeah, Mr. Krant.
Yeah, I agree with both Mr. Buechner and Mr. Tagle. I think just some tweaks, and I'd like to see the details of that lower window, both from the inside view and outside, and actual dimensions on there so I can see more clearly what those heights and depths of the first floor and how that all fits together. We've talked a lot about it, and I can understand the languages, but I like to see pictures and dimensions on the pictures.
Yes, Mr. Savinov.
I've heard a couple comments about the fears about the vacant building and what it's going to be. Just a reminder to the Planning Commission that we review site plans all the time with speculative space for retail. And we don't know what the retail is going to be, but we know that what the uses that are permitted in the district are. We know what the parking requirements are. The applicant showed parking for retail. That's the requirement. Any use that goes in there is going to be retail, or it's going to be something that's permitted by right in the neighborhood node and is compliant with parking. So we assume that they're required to be compliant. They will be compliant. So I don't want anyone to be scared about the fact that it's vacant. Anything that going in there is going to be retail and will be compliant with the zoning ordinance.
I can ask a question?
Yes, please.
Could they knock down that community building?
If they knock down, they could knock down the building, but if they come back with a new building, it's going to come before the Planning Commission.
So they'd have to have something similar if they reconfigured that commercial space?
If they knock down the building, they're going to come back with something more compliant than what's there today.
Okay, thank you.
And it's my understanding that if they knock down the building, whatever replaces it, they will maintain an equivalent or better community center because they've already provided for that. So if they're going to tear it down, they've got to rebuild it.
So they have to rebuild it as a component of that new space, or they'd eliminate the equivalent number of units and put the community center in one of the two buildings.
Correct, and that is what he mentioned, but I was thinking if it's fully rented or leased, because I imagine these are rental properties. So if it's, then they'd have to, they'd have to remove tenants in order to convert, but whatever. That's part of the deal, I understand. Okay. Ms. Malala-Holly?
No, I would like for them to come back to address the transparency for sure. If there is opportunity and room for us to see better planning, then that's a design, then yes, that's what I would vote for as well.
Yes.
Good evening. I'm Brian Nager, and I'm a partner in the project. I just wanted to chime in quickly. This might be a good time to just bring up the fact that, we did the project on Big Beaver, and we've talked about the differences between Big Beaver and Wattles here. We put out a great product. We think this is going to be different, but, appropriate for the neighborhood. Some of the things that were going back and forth, I think the main issues were the retail. The reason I got up was because Keith actually does the leasing for the retail. There's nothing more than we want than to fill that retail. So, tearing down the building is probably not an option, and definitely not at this point. You've got a valuable building there. Obviously, the best and highest use would be to, release that building. Obviously, we would like to put in, a good tenant in there, and whoever comes along, we're gonna weigh out those options. And again, going forward, anything that's done to that building is only going to make it more compliant. So, another factor is when we come in and say, hey, we want to do this development as we did on Big Beaver, we're going to build X, Y, and Z units. We're also going to incorporate some retail. In this case, the retail is already built. The parking is accounted for. It's almost like saying, okay, pretend nothing was there. Here, we're going to build this retail building. Well, the building's already built. So now all we have to do is lease it. We're one step ahead. The questions I've heard and the concerns that I've heard were mainly about the egress windows. Let's keep in mind that that's a safety issue. So we're providing those because that's required by the code. Richie has offered to do the grates over there, and I think putting that as a condition of approval is great. And then I think that going forward, we could work with the city and making sure that it's compliant, it meets all the code requirements, and it's attractive. Because at the end of the day, we want to build attractive units here, and we want them to lease. I know we have a working relationship with Troy. We did the project over there. It turned out great. We've had nothing but great feedback. We want to build a quality project. So I think that everything you're getting here is attention to detail. And we've certainly laid that out. So the concerns were, vacant retail. Obviously, we're working diligently on filling that, and we would like to do that. The building will be more compliant in the future if we make exterior improvements. The grates, those will be provided if you were willing to do so to put as a condition of approval. The transparency was the last issue, and the comment I heard was potentially making those windows larger. We're going to introduce different size windows. May not be a bad idea, but I think the transparency requirement is from 2 to 8 feet, which is on the first floor. Again, this was done to meet that was done to create, we have a commercial use here. Shopping center, retail, you want the glass, you want to see in there, right? Residential's a little bit different, so maybe it's a gray area, and I think that's why they provided in that, in the ordinance, the way it's written, to deviate strictly from the glass. So while it's 41% versus 50, there are other factors. I think that's a little bit subjective. So, again, if we could meet the 50, maybe we do, but I think it's on the first floor, and I don't think that the additional glass on the first floor is what we would be looking for. So to keep it within the spirit of the ordinance, I think that we did the alternative method. So, obviously, we would like to hear a vote on it and conditions of approval, and we would work with the city to mitigate any other concerns that came up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Sabanont, could I ask a question? Because I feel like the main reason that we would ask for them to come back and do a postponement would be to see a fix of the transparency issue. But am I to understand that from the zoning ordinance requirement on transparency, it's focusing on that certain first floor? So if they add the windows to the second floor, it really doesn't affect the number?
Yes, except this is a little bit non-traditional type of a facade, where the first floor is,
Living, right.
well, you have basement, first floor, second floor. So it's a little bit different. And the authority to grant flexibility is clearly given to the Planning Commission. So if the Planning Commission were to say, you know, we approve it subject to the petitioner providing something to staff to look at, I mean, you're kind of taking your authority and you're trusting it in staff, if you will. I don't know if I've answered your question or not.
Mr. Tagle.
I understand what the code says between 2 foot and 8 foot, but I would be more receptive if they made an attempt to hit that 50% with the fenestration on the north elevation, even because of the conditions, some of what Brent just mentioned, some of what we've discussed here, you know, maybe that 2 foot to 8 foot is not an ideal solution in this particular project for a number of reasons, but I still would like to see what they can do to, you know, get closer to the 50%. We haven't even talked about the 30% that they haven't hit on the end elevations either, you know, so
There is that too.
I would be more receptive to seeing what they can do coming back. I mean, I'm only one vote.
Okay. Mr. Lambert?
I was going to make a motion, but I don't know if Mr. Beekner has a question. I don't want to jump ahead of him. So.
They answered my questions on the commercial side of it. I feel better about that for me. The transparency thing, I agree that I think they're close, but I'd like to see a little chance there. I like what Mr. Krent's saying, and it's easy to say, guys, and hopefully I've got your attention, but if your kid fell in that hole, or your dog fell in that hole, or your kid hit your head on something, that's very different than somebody else's. And most of us in the room have kids, and I hold that very important. So I'd like to see an improvement and details like Mr. Krent asked for. That's what I'd like to see. I think you're close.
Mr. Lambert, go ahead, but while you're at it, don't forget about that bike rack.
Yes. Okay. All right. Resolve that the preliminary site plan approval pursuant to Article 8 of the zoning ordinance as requested for the proposed Waddles Square Apartments located on the south side of Waddles, east of John R., Section 24, Zone NN, Neighborhood Node F, Zoning District B, postponed for the following reasons. Number one, to increase transparency on the units and to address appropriate safety concerns about the first level balconies and the I don't know what's the appropriate term, that lower level escape area.
Egress windows?
Egress areas be also addressed as far as safety is concerned, and to add one more bike rack or bike unit.
And would you like to add anything about just specifying that the transparency on all sides?
I will be happy to include that in my resolution.
Do we have a second?
A second.
Mr. Faison. Okay, discussion? I'm just going to say one thing. I understand what people are thinking, and it's fine to send it back and see what they come back with, but I do get a little bit concerned sometimes when we do that, because it might come back with huge windows and then all of a sudden it doesn't look as good anymore, and then that's what we're voting on. So I'm a little bit torn on that. Anyway, are we ready for the vote, or does someone else want to make a comment? I don't have to get the last word. Mr. Zadna.
I just want to clarify, so we've got, we've got some agendas coming up with items on it, so what you're going to get, the conversation at the next meeting is going to be focused on these conditions. We're not going to talk about parking, we're not going to talk about landscaping, we're going to talk about these conditions. The memo is going to be short, and it's going to talk about...
We're going to talk about that bike rack.
Right.
That was easy.
All right,
With all due respect, can I request a clarification? Because I'm the one who has to bring it back. So when I come back, and I don't know who the question gets directed to increase the transparency, am I increasing the transparency on all elevations? Am I increasing the transparency between 2 feet and 8 feet? Am I increasing the transparency on the whole entire elevation? I need some direction.
So the requirement of the ordinance, I think the motion is to increase transparency on all sides. So reminder, the north side, for the building that faces Waddles, the requirement is 50%. On the west side, there's no transparency requirement. On the east side, there's a 30% requirement. And on the south side of that building, there's a 30% requirement. For the other building, there's a 30% requirement for all sides that abut parking.
Okay, so, and making that revision and bringing it back to the Planning Commission, is it for the whole entire facade to get those percentages, in your opinion?
Yes.
Okay, because there was discussion about from this foot to that foot, so I just want to be clear that I do what you're asking.
I think that's fair because the zoning ordinance now has it like this, but what we're saying is we'd just like to see more transparency on the front facade. Well, just what you said, but from top to bottom.
So there's 7 elevations, 1 has no requirement, 5 have a 30% requirement, and 1 has a 50% requirement.
I think that's right.
Okay, just want to be sure that I know what I have to do when I come back.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, and I believe we are ready for the roll call.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert? Yes. Ms. Malala-Holly?
Yes.
Ms. Parakis?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Biekner?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Fox?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, next we have public comment for items that are on the agenda. I know we already opened it up for that, but if anyone had anything else to say? Seeing no one coming forward, we'll move on to Planning Commission comment. We will start at that end. Ms. Zarnicki?
I have none, thank you, Madam Chair.
I just wanted to, so I was originally going to bring this up in the context of this development before Brent clarified that they were compliant with parking. I know a year-ish ago, we had a couple of different conversations about parking, and there was reference to a study that was coming out. I know that post-master plan, we're potentially looking at a bunch of, ordinance tweaks and adjustments after that. So I guess I just wanted to touch base on that whole parking conversation and see if it was the intention that it will be brought up post the master plan approval.
It is the intention that it be brought up. It would be, it's on the list of, it was put on the back burner because of our focus on the master plan. And our focus, assuming the master plan gets approved in the near future by City Council, priority A is going to be looking at neighborhood nodes. And then it'll either be priority B or priority C. Priority B would be, I want to look at, I want to have a discussion with the Planning Commission about looking at North Troy. And I think it's time that we come up with maybe a zoning district for North Troy that's flexible, that allows maybe the repurposing of some buildings and some infilling of some of the underutilized parking lots in North Troy appropriately, so that North Troy can be successful but not negatively impact any of the neighbors. So I think priority C would be parking. We've already had preliminary discussions with OHM, our traffic and parking experts. They're ready to go, but we just wanted to make sure that the timing was right in terms of jumping into that effort.
Thank you, and thank you again to the planning office for all of the different balls you have in the air right now and how you're successfully juggling them, so thank you.
Mr. Biekner?
I want to say good to have Brent back, and I wanted to welcome JR to these chairs.
Mr. Hudson?
Nothing.
Mr. Faison?
Nothing for me.
Mr. Lambert?
Just maybe a quick question, but a long answer. Give us a quick overview, because everyone is asking us about the Kmart site and what is the procedure for going forward, because we already know about U of M Hospital buying part of the property, but because it's subject to the plan unit development that was adopted, what, in 2008, I believe? Or
Yeah.
how does that go forward from here?
So the site is controlled by a PUD, as you indicated. The PUD provides for, it's a concept plan similar to what we approved at Crooks and Long Lake, where it's got conceptual drawings and kind of blob drawings with maximums and that type of thing. So that's controlling now. They have not submitted an application. We anticipate, and this is my speculation, so if there's anyone from a newspaper, don't quote me because I'm speculating. I'm speculating that that what we're going to see is going to be a mixed-use development that probably has similar components to what was approved 15 years ago. What is really exciting is one of the standards of approval, one of the 18 standards of approval for a PUD is public benefit. And I would argue that they're about 95% towards completion of a dramatic, significant public benefit, which is demolition of a 975,000 square foot functionally obsolete building. In and of itself, that's almost, the grounds for approval of any amendment to the PUD. So we anticipate they come before us with a proposal to amend the PUD, change the concept drawing. But we've got nothing submitted so far. So we do know, according to the press release, that approximately 7.5 acres will be dedicated to a facility owned and operated by University of Michigan Hospital. But that's all we know at this point.
To put that in context, 7.5 acres.
Of 40.
Oh.
But the Planning Commission will be the first body to see and consider any application that's submitted. And we'll start, first step will be, we're looking at first step being like an informal meeting where the applicant introduces themselves and talks about what they want to do on the site.
Ms. Malala-Holly?
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Knapp? Mr. Cagle? Ms. Dufresne?
Nothing, thank you.
Jackie submitted an email to the Planning Commission about a week ago asking people about their plans to attend the May 28th meeting because it's the Tuesday after the long weekend. We got responses from about half of the Planning Commission members. So rather than resend an email, we're all here. So could I have a show of hands? How many of the members plan to be in attendance of the Planning Commission meeting on Tuesday, May 28th? Plan to be here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 out of 9. Thank you very much.
Looks like we're going to have that meeting.
Yes.
JR?
No, nothing. Appreciate being up here. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I've got nothing, so I think we're going to adjourn. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.